Hi, this is Bambi with Soul Conversations with Bambi, and today we're going to talk to Dan Nash. Dan has had a pivotal moment in his life where he has turned and gone in a different direction, and he is making changes for people, and we want to raise awareness right now for human trafficking. This is a subject that's near and dear to my heart. When I managed a local domestic violence shelter here is when I first became aware of the magnitude of trafficking in that it is everywhere. It's every place. We had some girls come through that were trafficked. It was horrific to me. In time, we started a human trafficking shelter here, and I was on the board for the startup of it. And I follow people who are passionate about this cause. And I would like to introduce you to Dan Nash and let him tell you a little bit about where he came from and the turning point in his life regarding this subject.
Thank you, Bambi. I'm excited to be here today and chat with you about this topic. It's clearly a topic that I'm passionate about, much like yourself. So it's always fun to talk to like-minded folks. So for me, I had a 27-year career as a Missouri State Trooper, and during that career, I did a variety of different things. I worked narcotics and vice crimes. I worked in violent crime. Obviously, I started out in patrol like everybody does. But while I was in a violent crime unit, investigating mostly, homicides and attempted homicides and things of that nature, I really developed an interest in human trafficking. And I think where it started from was I saw sometimes, what I thought was maybe like a trafficker. We didn't even really call them traffickers back then. We didn't really know what to really call them because we didn't really have any training in human trafficking. And even today, law enforcement has about 17% of law enforcement in the entire United States has human trafficking training. So most law enforcement doesn't know what to do. And I was in that exact same situation. So I saw some things. I thought, well, this just doesn't seem right. And so I ended up reaching out to this young lady that I'd had some information about, and I contacted her on the parking lot of a hotel. And there was this gentleman with her, and right away I thought she was probably going to be a trafficking victim, and this was probably her trafficker. And I did pretty much what I thought was the right thing to do at the time, because that's what we did with all these other crimes. I just figured, well, that must be the same thing I do with trafficking, right? But I didn't know that wasn't what we do. So I'm talking to her, and the more I'm talking to her, the more angry she's getting at me, the more she is, really becoming very difficult. She's cursing at me. She's not helping me. She's not talking to me. She's not answering my questions. She's not wanting to really have anything to do with me. And I'm sitting here thinking, why are you not telling me what's going on? I'm trying to help you. Why are you not talking to me? And she wasn't talking to me. And finally, I just honestly got frustrated with the whole situation, and I just released him and her, and on their merry little way they went. And then it was a couple months later, I get a call from another law enforcement agency that says, hey, are you familiar with this person? And I said, I am. And they're like, well, we just found her in one of those, those rent by the week hotel places that every town has. And we found her. She had slit both her wrists, and she was found dead laying in the bathtub. And on the lip of the bathtub was a photo of a little boy. And the officer told me that they had reached out and found her mother so they could do a notification to the mother and to the family. And they asked about the photo. And the mother said, yes, that's her little boy, and I now have custody of him. And then she started talking about what had happened to her daughter. She was molested from the time she was 7 until about 10. She never told anybody. And then in high school, she started becoming just kind of a problem kid. She wasn't doing well in school. She was getting involved in alcohol and then later drugs. She was running away from home. She couldn't, have relationships. She was having all kinds of issues that were going on. And then it was only later that the mother found out that she had been, sexually victimized as a child. But by then, her daughter had basically left home, quit school, and was just gone. And the mother said that I didn't have any contact with her for about 2 years. And then I get a call from social services who says that, hey, your daughter is in the hospital. she has given birth to a son, but that son tested positive for methamphetamine, and that they were taking that little boy into protective custody and wanted to replace that child with grandma. And of course, grandma said, well, yes, of course, I'm going to take my grandson in. And then she said, I only saw my daughter one time after the birth of my grandson. And during that meeting, I actually gave her this photo of her son. And that's what she had on the lip of the bathtub. And I kind of took that a little bit to heart. I mean, I honestly kind of took it kind of hard, because I felt like I had really let her down, that I hadn't, I'd had her, I just didn't know what to do with it. I should have been able to do something else with this, but I just didn't know. I tried to do, I guess, what I thought was best at the time, but I didn't know, you don't know what you don't know, right? And I was just treating that like I was any other criminal thing, and that's not how you do with these human trafficking cases. So I kind of made a pact to myself, I guess, at that point, where I said, I just can't let this happen to anybody else. I've got to figure this out. And so I started reading and researching and just trying to figure out how to do this, and studying and trying to take classes on my own, and trying to find like a mentor, which was impossible at that time. And then really just trial by error, just trying to figure out, what the heck do we need to be doing with these victims and these situations. And that's really where it started for me. And fortunately, I was able to be part of the newly formed human trafficking unit in Missouri. And I left violent crime and went to that. And I ran the enforcement side of the AG's human trafficking task force. So I had, experience doing that, and just kept doing this until at least I had some knowledge as to what I'm doing. I mean, we're all always trying to continue to figure this stuff out, but at least I got to a point where I felt like I was at least somewhat proficient in it.
This is this is hard for me because it's a very emotional subject, and so I have chills and tears, and my heart's just racing because I'm so grateful for you. It's difficult to talk about. It isn't, I mean, it's a hard subject. People want to close their eyes, close their ears, pretend it isn't real and it isn't happening, but it is. And those of us that know need to do exactly what you're doing and raise awareness for it. So tell me now, because you're so passionate about it and you're on the road to this new project that is working toward helping people to understand and the training. So tell me a little bit now about where you are.
So about 3 months ago, I retired from my job as a state trooper, and the director of the AG task force at the time, Allison Phillips, and I pretty much had the same kind of vision and a similar background of some instances of what kind of got us involved in this to begin with. And so we both decided to start our own business and to do this in the private sector, where we felt like we could have a bigger impact and have more, more influence, I guess, so to speak. So we opened up a private business called the Human Trafficking Training Center. And now we travel all around the US. And if the border was open, we'd travel into Canada as well. And we teach law enforcement. We do consulting for law enforcement. We help bring law enforcement and victim advocates together and teach them how to be on the same page and work together as partners. So we're teaching them as well. We're bringing teaching to medical hospitals and medical facilities and things like that. And unbelievably, I mean, we're very, very, very busy. Couple of 3 weeks ago, as you know, we were in Searcy, Arkansas, teaching a class in Arkansas. We had 120 officers, I think, in that class from all around the state of Arkansas. And I think we have 4 more trainings to do in Arkansas. And then after that, I went to Boise, Idaho, and was teaching there. And then I came back, and then I was in Kansas City earlier this week teaching there. And so yeah, it's something I'm passionate about, because I realize that if we're going to stop this, there's a couple things that have to take place. And the first thing is we have to have some training for law enforcement. Training is really the foundation, and no matter what your job is, right? Whether you're a law enforcement or you're a doctor or you're a plumber or you're an electrician, whatever, you've got to have some training. Nobody says, okay, go put my electrical in my house if you don't know what to do, unless they've had some training, right? So to send law enforcement out here to investigate human trafficking when they have no training is a recipe for disaster, a recipe for disaster for them, and a recipe for disaster for these victims. And consequently, the victims just get looked over, and nothing is happening for them. So training is the ultimate foundation. So that's, the first part of what we do. And then the second part is, the consulting and bringing everyone together, because if you think that the police by themselves are just going to solve this, it's not going to happen. You're going to have, the hospitals, because they're a funnel point for all these trafficking victims. You need the community, you need community leaders, you need faith leaders, you need all these victim advocates, and you need these shelters, and you need all these different people, the truck drivers, Truckers Against Trafficking goes around the
Yes.
country teaching truck drivers. So you need truck drivers, and you need casinos, and you need bus depots and airports, and you need all these people having some idea of what they're looking for and what they're looking at and who to call and what to do. And once you develop that whole community between law enforcement and everyone else, then we'll be able to do something with this. But if we don't get there, the wheel's just going to keep rolling and rolling and rolling. And our job is to, bust up that wheel. I mean, that's our job.
Great venue for training. I love it. I love that. When I saw that, I thought that's just fabulous. So very
Yeah,
proud of
Truckers
you.
Against Trafficking does a great job. And,
Mhm.
think about it. There's, I don't even know how many millions probably of truck drivers around the country.
All over.
And they're driving all around, and they're rolling through truck stops, and they're rolling through hotels, and they're rolling through all these different funnel points, right? And they're going to
Exactly.
see stuff because they're out there at night, they're out there during the day, they're out there all hours, right? And they're going to see things. And if they know what to do and who to report that to, and what to look for.
What to look for.
When I
Absolutely.
was in Idaho, the Truckers Against Trafficking people were telling me that since they've started, and I think they've been around about 12 years, I think, somewhere around there, but they've had 1,300 different truck drivers call in victims across the country in that 12 years.
Wow.
I mean, that's like 100 a year,
Fabulous.
right?
100 people saved a year.
Yeah, it's a great program. And and we did a similar kind of training with casinos, and we've done a similar kind of training with bus depots and hotels, and there's lots of different places that you can see this stuff. And you hit the nail on the head earlier when I hear people talk about, well, my city is a hub and this and that. There's no really such thing as a hub. Are there certain places that maybe you might have a little bit more trafficking than maybe other places because maybe they're a larger city and they have more people, or there's specific things that you're seeing? Maybe you're a border town. Well, obviously you're going to have more trafficking, and especially with the way things are currently, you're going to have that. But it doesn't matter in the trafficking world. It doesn't matter. People think, oh, all these trafficking victims are just poor, minorities or whatever, and that's not the case. Some are poor, and there's definitely some with that, but some are rich. I've had rich kids be trafficked. I've had upper middle class kids be trafficked. I've had poor kids be trafficked. I've had black kids and white kids and Latino kids and Asian kids, and none of that matters. It doesn't matter. All that matters is what vulnerabilities you have. That's what the traffickers look for. And that could be anything. It could be your parents are divorced. That gives you some vulnerabilities. You think you're a little overweight, or you think you're a little too skinny, or you don't like the acne you have, or
You're lonely.
You're lonely. That's a big deal with COVID. That was a huge deal when the kids weren't in schools and everybody's, stuck at home. Loneliness was horrible, and we saw the numbers just starting to go through the roof. So you're lonely, right? exactly. Or the big things that we see is that you were either sexually or physically abused as a kid. Sexually abused as a kid is probably the number one thing we see. Man, I don't know that I've ever interviewed a trafficking victim that was not physically or sexually abused as a kid. That's
Right.
almost always where it starts. Always.
I totally believe in that. And one thing that I encountered in the domestic violence shelter was they train females to go find vulnerable. Now, I know that there's male, but my experience has been with female. But
yeah, there's
they
significantly
train
more
people.
females than males. They do. Yeah, and a lot of times those girls, they call them the bottom girl, and a lot of times those girls, they were already being trafficked, right? And now they have worked their way up to what they call the bottom girl, and now, I mean, you wouldn't think it, because you'd be thinking, well, logically, they already know what happened to them. Why would they recruit other people into this world, right? That's logically what you think. But if you think about it, if they're a bottom, they're in a little bit better position than they were before. They're maybe not having to have sex with 10 or 15 men a day. Maybe they're only having to have sex with 5 men a day because they've recruited these other people. So you can clearly see the motivation of why they would want to recruit other people, because I mean, look at what the trauma they're going through every day, and they're just trying to survive. They're just trying to get through the day. And if this helps them get through the day and helps them survive, they're desperate. They're going to do that.
Absolutely. Well, there's some, as we know, brainwashing that comes with this, and some reprogramming, and the things that were instilled, the childhood trauma is fed in this, and people are kind of chosen, as you said, by certain traits they have. So once again, I want to thank you. Dan and I met on LinkedIn, and we just started having some conversation about this. And I asked him if he would have a meeting with me and we could talk about this. So I just want you to know that I'm so proud of you and all you're doing and what your organization is doing. So can you give us some information on how to contact you?
Sure. So you can contact me at the Human Trafficking Training Center.com. My email address is Dan at humantraffickingtrainingcenter.com. And you can see a little bit about what we're doing. Maybe you want to get involved somehow. You want to sponsor a training for law enforcement in your area, or you want to maybe volunteer when we have a training in your area. We're always looking for people in the community that want to help, whether it's someone that might want to supply lunches, or help with funding, or help with locations, or whatever. So there's lots of things you can do. And then we actually do have community events that we do as well. So maybe you want to sponsor a community event and you want us to come to your town and do an event, for all members of your community, and, community leaders, faith leaders, whatever it is. It's probably the most comprehensive human trafficking event for civilians in the United States. We really wanted to take as much as we could without the law enforcement sensitive stuff and really teach you everything that we can. So it's very, very in-depth. It's not your 1 hour human trafficking 101 that I see a lot of people doing. This is like, if we do the whole thing, it's a 7-hour deal we usually do on a Saturday. And we take you through the whole day and show you how it works. And we show you everything that you probably want to know and more about human trafficking, and how you can help and get involved.
As I said, I respect you, I admire you, but mostly I thank you. Thank you for your time today and for all that you're doing.
Thank you, ma'am. I really appreciate that. And you have a good day, and be careful.
You too, Dan. Thank you.